It is 5:03 in the morning on a frostbitten Tuesday in February, and a convoy of black vehicles is rolling through the dark streets of Laredo, Texas. At the front of that column is a Bearcat G3 armored vehicle, engine running a low diesel growl, no lights. Behind it, 3 HSI tactical vans and 2 DEA vehicles carry 70 federal agents. Every one of them knows the target: a warehouse, a refrigerated produce warehouse, or what used to be one. Legally, it doesn't exist anymore, declared bankrupt and liquidated 14 months ago. On paper, an empty building at the edge of an industrial district, burning down its final lease, waiting for a tenant who never came. The power meter on the side of that building disagrees. At 5:03 a.m. and 40 seconds, the Bearcat punches through the loading bay gate. At the same moment, at 6 separate entry points around the perimeter, HSI and DEA breach teams go dynamic. 6 doors, 6 breach moments, all within the same 4-second window. Inside, 40-degree air. The hum of refrigeration units running at full load and stacked floor-to-ceiling on industrial pallets. Shrink-wrapped bricks of methamphetamine and vacuum-sealed bundles of cash, chilled to mimic the weight and density of legitimate refrigerated cargo. This is not what an empty warehouse looks like. This is what $186 million laundered through a cold chain looks like. The question isn't just how they built it. The question is what cracked it. And the answer is a number. A simple, almost bureaucratic number buried inside a utility invoice that an algorithm flagged in under 11 seconds. One data point, 11 seconds. Then 19 months of the most methodical undercover work HSI has run in the Southern District of Texas in a decade. Here's how it happened. The date that matters most is not the morning of the raid. It's a Thursday afternoon, roughly 20 months earlier, when a customs revenue analyst at the Laredo Port of Entry sits down at a federal trade compliance terminal and runs a routine cross-reference audit on import declarations filed by registered cold chain logistics operators in the Webb County corridor. Her job, technically, is to look for tariff mismatches. Declared weight versus customs duty paid. Detailed, unglamorous work that on most days produces nothing but paperwork. On this particular Thursday, a secondary algorithm running in the background, a utility consumption anomaly detector the Trade Compliance Division had quietly integrated 8 months earlier, flags a single commercial account. The flagged entity is a registered produce importer, operating out of a refrigerated warehouse on the south side of Laredo's industrial district. The flag reads, "Power consumption inconsistent with declared throughput." She pulls the full record. The facility has declared an average monthly avocado import volume sufficient to fill approximately 90 refrigerated container connections per month. Standard for that commodity, that volume, that ambient temperature range. 90 connections. The utility billing data shows 1,400 active reefer container power hookups per month. 1,400. A 15-to-1 mismatch between electricity drawn and fruit moved. She stares at that number for a moment. Then she pulls the last 6 months of billing. The ratio holds. Not a spike. Not a one-time anomaly. A steady, repeating pattern. 15 times more refrigeration load than the product on file could possibly explain. She writes a referral memo and sends it to the Homeland Security Investigations Field Office in Laredo at 4:17 that afternoon. That memo is the first domino. I spent hours going through the reconstructed case file, and that 15-to-1 ratio kept nagging at me. Not because it's a clever trick, but because it's almost absurdly simple. The people running this facility had found a way to move hundreds of millions of dollars through a logistics network, but they never thought to manage what the power company was billing them for. The most sophisticated money laundering operation in the Webb County corridor was undone, in the end, by an electricity invoice. The HSI field office in Laredo assigns the referral to a financial crimes unit led by a senior special agent. We'll call him Agent Reyes, who has spent 11 years working transnational criminal organizations in South Texas. Reyes reads the memo twice. He pulls the corporate registration for the facility. The operating entity is a logistics firm called Aztec Cold Transport LLC, incorporated in Delaware 18 months prior. Its listed principal officer is a man with a clean record and an address in San Antonio. Its registered agent is a law firm that handles dozens of similar incorporations per year. Nothing unusual on the surface, everything unusual underneath. Reyes contacts the utility provider and requests 12 months of consumption data under a national security administrative subpoena. No court order required at this stage, no notification to the target. What he gets back confirms and deepens the picture. The facility has been running maximum refrigeration load continuously, around the clock, 7 days a week, for at least 14 months. The only breaks in consumption are brief, 2 to 4 hours, occurring roughly every 3 weeks. Reyes marks those breaks on a calendar. They correspond almost precisely with dates on which U.S. Customs and Border Protection records show outbound vehicle movements from the facility. Cash pickups. He doesn't know that yet, but he suspects it. And in HSI's Financial Crimes Unit, suspicion is where architecture starts. Over the next 6 weeks, Reyes builds a surveillance package. He requests aerial observation assets from HSI's National Security Investigations Division. He pulls automated targeting system records for every freight movement in and out of the facility over the past 18 months. He cross-references the facility's water consumption, another utility that turns out to be dramatically below baseline for a working produce operation, and begins mapping the network of companies that have filed as shippers or receivers in transactions linked to the facility's customs declarations. What he finds is a web. 23 shell companies spread across 4 states: Texas, Arizona, California, and Nevada. Each one incorporated separately, each with its own registered agent, its own federal tax identification number, its own paper trail of fabricated invoices and freight manifests. Together, they form a logistics network that, if you squint at it, looks like a mid-sized regional cold chain operation. If you look at the actual movement of money rather than the movement of paper, it's a structured laundering architecture designed to absorb cartel drug proceeds, layer them through fictitious freight transactions, and return them as clean operating revenue. The meth fills the freezer units. The cash cycles through the shell companies. 2 streams running in parallel. Product coming north, money going in circles until it comes out clean. Reyes brings in DEA's El Paso Intelligence Center to run the drug flow side of the analysis. Within 3 weeks, Epic analysts have matched shipment timing patterns from the Laredo facility to known trafficking corridors tied to a Sinaloa-aligned distribution network operating in South Texas and the Southwest. The picture is no longer a financial anomaly. It's a full transnational criminal enterprise. The case gets a code name: Operation Cold Ledger. And it needs something it doesn't yet have. It needs a way in. The surveillance package is solid. The financial map is growing. But without an insider, someone who can tell investigators what's actually inside that building, who moves it, and when, Operation Cold Ledger is a map with no center. Reyes knows that. So does the DEA supervisor assigned to the Joint Task Force. The case can build from the outside indefinitely, but it won't produce prosecutable evidence against the highest-level organizers without a cooperating source close to the operation. Finding that source is going to take 4 more months, and when they find him, he's not who anyone expected. His name, in the case file, a composite, is Marcus Delgado. He's not a cartel member. He's not a money launderer. He's a freight broker. Specifically, Marcus Delgado is the owner of a small licensed customs brokerage in Laredo that handles paperwork for mid-sized produce importers. 19 years in the business. Wife and 2 kids in a subdivision off Loop 20. Clean record. He also, as HSI learns through 3 months of financial surveillance, has been processing fraudulent customs declarations for Aztec Cold Transport LLC for 14 months, receiving structured cash payments, carefully kept below reporting thresholds, to make those declarations look clean. Delgado is not the top of the network. He's a facilitator, a legitimate businessman who made one catastrophically bad decision and then made it again, and again, and again, until it stopped being reversible. HSI approaches him on a Wednesday morning in the parking lot of a Whataburger on San Dario Avenue. 2 agents, no dramatic takedown. They sit across from him in a booth and tell him what they know. They give him time to call a lawyer. After 2 weeks of negotiations between his attorney and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Texas, Marcus Delgado agrees to cooperate. He is placed on a wire. For the next 11 months, Delgado continues to process freight declarations for Aztec Cold Transport and its affiliated shell companies. Every phone call, every in-person meeting, every email exchange is monitored, recorded, and logged by the HSI surveillance team. Reyes and his partner run Delgado carefully. Daily check-ins, strict protocols on what he can and cannot say. Careful management of the risk that any single interaction might spook the network's leadership. What the wire produces over those 11 months is extraordinary. Delgado's contacts aren't just in Laredo. The freight broker network feeding the money laundering architecture extends to freight managers in El Paso, Phoenix, Fresno, and Las Vegas. Delgado speaks with all of them, because in the legitimate world, he actually knows these people. He's worked with them for years. And now, on Wire, he draws them into recorded conversations that map the operational structure of the laundering network in granular detail. The case file, when eventually compiled for prosecutors, runs to more than 3,000 pages. 11 months of Wire, hundreds of recorded conversations. Financial transaction records for 23 shell entities spanning 4 states. And at the center of all of it, the warehouse in Laredo. Always humming, never sleeping, always cold. Here's what surprised me most about this case. Not the scale, but how ordinary the mechanics were. The shell companies used the same off-the-shelf Delaware incorporation templates available to any small business owner. The customs declarations ran through standard freight broker software. The refrigeration units were commercially available industrial cold room systems you can buy from any agricultural supply company. No exotic technology, no encrypted communication platform requiring NSA-level resources to crack. The sophistication wasn't technical, it was organizational. It was the patience of building something that looked, at every individual junction, like a legitimate business. That's what makes it genuinely hard to detect. And genuinely easy to miss. 9 months into the Wire, Operation Cold Ledger hits a wall. In October, roughly 5 months before the eventual raid, the HSI surveillance team monitoring vehicle traffic near the warehouse picks up something unexpected during a routine overnight observation. A vehicle with no prior appearance in any surveillance log, a late-model panel van with Arizona plates, makes 2 slow passes of the facility perimeter in the early morning hours, then parks 3 blocks away for 40 minutes before leaving. No activity at the facility itself. No contact with known subjects. Could be nothing. A lost driver, a coincidental stop. Reyes flags it immediately. One of the things a cooperating source on a wire operation fears most, and one of the things an experienced handler watches for, is counter-surveillance. If someone in the network suspects they're being watched, standard cartel operational security protocol is to run counter-surveillance sweeps before any significant movement. The van's pattern, slow passes, static observation, no apparent purpose, fits that profile. Reyes has to make a fast decision. If the network has detected the investigation, the Wire needs to go cold immediately to protect Delgado. But if it goes cold now, prosecutors lose the final months of evidence building they need to bring charges against the highest level organizers, not just the facilitators. He convenes an emergency task force meeting. DEA and HSI analysts spend 48 hours running the Arizona plate, pulling any prior intersection of that vehicle with known surveillance detection routes, cross-referencing it against every name in the Operation Cold Ledger subject file. Nothing. The van comes back clean, the plate registered to a landscaping company in Tucson with no apparent connection to any subject in the case. The consensus is cautious. Coincidental. The Wire stays hot. Reyes approves the decision, but orders enhanced coverage on Delgado for the next 3 weeks, and restricts the broker's in-person contact with network members to phone only. It costs the investigation 2 significant meetings that would have produced valuable evidence. But Delgado is protected. The Wire survives. It's the right call. By December, the prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office have what they need to seek indictments. But here's the piece most accounts of cases like this miss entirely. Getting the indictments sealed and coordinating a simultaneous takedown across 4 states without any single arrest tipping off the network is in many ways harder than the 19 months of investigation that came before it. The coordinator problem. And it's about to become Operation Cold Ledger's sharpest test. The Western District of Texas prosecutors file sealed indictments naming 44 individuals in early January. The indictments are distributed under strict compartmentalization. Each cooperating U.S. Attorney's Office in the other 3 districts receives only the names relevant to their jurisdiction, with no cross-district list. The coordination call happens on a secure line between 5 federal prosecutors and the HSI and DEA supervisors on January 14th. The plan is to execute all 44 arrests simultaneously, or as close to simultaneously as operationally possible, to prevent any single subject from receiving a warning call and destroying evidence or fleeing. The subjects are distributed across Laredo, San Antonio, El Paso, Phoenix, Fresno, and Las Vegas. Coordinating that breadth requires HSI field officers in multiple districts, DEA task force teams, and in 2 cases, U.S. Marshals Fugitive Operations Units, all operating under the same sealed authority with a synchronized execute window. The window chosen is 5 a.m. local time, adjusted for time zones. The Laredo warehouse team goes first, 5:03 a.m. Central, because that's the highest value target and the one most likely to produce physical evidence that could be destroyed if word got out. All other arrest teams in Arizona and California hold to Pacific time, hitting their targets at the equivalent moment. The night before the operation, a logistics issue surfaces. The HSI tactical team assigned to a target in Fresno, a freight manager identified in wire recordings as a key node in the California money laundering layer, discovers at 11 p.m. that the target's vehicle isn't at his registered address. Cell tower pings show him at a location 12 miles away, apparently at a second residence. The Fresno team has 90 minutes to verify the new location, confirm the address, and adjust their approach plan. They do it in 72 minutes. A local field agent makes a discreet drive-by, confirms the vehicle, confirms the address is accessible. The tactical plan is adjusted. The arrest goes forward on schedule at 5 a.m. Pacific. 44 warrants, 1 synchronized window. Not a single subject gets a warning call. Back in Laredo, the Bearcat G3 hits the loading bay gate at 5:03 a.m. and 40 seconds. What happens in the next 4 minutes is the product of 19 months of work. The gate goes down. Teams Alpha through Foxtrot breach their assigned entry points simultaneously. Flashbang deployment at the east and north loading doors, 2 concussive devices each, clears the immediate interior of the loading bay. Thermal imaging run from the aerial asset overhead the week prior had shown concentrated heat signatures in the western cold room corridor, indicating possible overnight personnel. Alpha team angles toward that corridor. They find 2 individuals, armed security, hired through a legitimate contract security firm with no apparent knowledge of what the warehouse actually contains, seated in a break room adjacent to the cold room corridor. Both comply immediately. No shots fired. The cold rooms are accessed sequentially. The tactical team moves through standard cold chain door protocols, oversized industrial freezer doors, hydraulic seal, 40 degrees Fahrenheit on the other side, and begins clearing each unit. 6 cold rooms of varying sizes. In the first 4, pallets of sealed product, floor to ceiling, shrink wrap over wooden pallets over steel base plates, all stamped with the produce markings and lot numbers of legitimate avocado importers. In cold rooms 5 and 6, the same visual. Same wrap, same markings, different contents. Cold room 5, 9.4 metric tons of methamphetamine, compressed into commercial-grade bricks and vacuum-sealed under packaging that, from the outside, is indistinguishable from commercial produce packaging. Chilled to produce standard temperatures to maintain the weight and density signature that cargo scanners use as a baseline for avocado shipments. Cold room 6, $14 million in US currency, vacuum sealed in bundles, stacked on pallets, chilled to the same temperature. The evidence log for those 2 cold rooms alone runs to 63 pages. By 5:47 a.m., 44 minutes after initial breach, the Laredo warehouse is secured, 2 individuals are in custody, and the evidence team has begun the systematic photography and cataloging process that will continue for the next 16 hours. At 5:52 a.m. Central, the operations coordinator in the Joint Command Post receives confirmation calls from all 6 arrest teams. 44 subjects in custody. No significant incidents. No subjects unaccounted for. The network is down. Here's what the numbers look like when the dust settles. 44 individuals indicted across 4 states. The charges span money laundering, drug trafficking conspiracy, structuring, and conspiracy to defraud the United States through false customs declarations. The weight of controlled substances seized at the Laredo facility alone, 9.4 metric tons of methamphetamine, is the single largest meth seizure in the history of the HSI Laredo field office. $14 million in cash, pulled from Cold Room 6. Total estimated proceeds laundered through the 23 shell companies over the operational period, $186 million. The Shell Logistics Network, Aztec Cold Transport, and its 22 affiliated entities, is dissolved. Federal forfeiture proceedings are initiated against every corporate account, vehicle, and piece of equipment touched by the network. Several real estate properties in San Antonio and Las Vegas, purchased through shell company proceeds, are flagged for civil forfeiture. Sentencing, for those who plead or are convicted at trial, will range from 7 to 22 years depending on role and cooperation. Marcus Delgado, the freight broker whose 11 months on a wire built the prosecutable architecture of the case, receives a cooperation agreement that substantially reduces his exposure. He will not serve federal time. The Customs Revenue analyst who wrote the referral memo on that Thursday afternoon, 473 days before the raid, is not named publicly. She received an internal commendation from HSI's Financial Crimes Division. We'll say it plainly. The sentence ranges for the mid-level shell company operators in this network are too light for what they enabled. The freight managers and logistics coordinators who processed fraudulent declarations for months, sometimes years, are facing 7 to 10 years for what was, functionally, institutional infrastructure for a drug distribution network that flooded methamphetamine into communities across the American Southwest. The indictment counts are legally appropriate. Whether they're proportionate to the human cost downstream is a different question, one the system largely declines to answer. What this case reveals, and it matters beyond Laredo, is something about how industrial money laundering actually works now. The cold chain industry in the United States processes billions of dollars of legitimate freight annually. Thousands of licensed cold storage facilities operate across the country, many of them in border-adjacent industrial zones with high commodity throughput and correspondingly complex utility profiles. The conditions that made the Laredo facility exploitable, a legitimate business framework, a bureaucratic gap between customs declarations and utility billing, a sufficiently large and routine industry that individual anomalies get lost in volume, those conditions aren't unique to Laredo. They're structural. The algorithm that flagged the power to produce mismatch in 11 seconds was deployed at one port of entry. As of the time Operation Cold Ledger closed, it had not been universally integrated across all U.S. customs processing districts. Sit with that for a second. The tool that cracked a $186 million laundering operation in 11 seconds of machine time after 4 years of that operation running invisibly exists, it works, and it isn't everywhere yet. Which raises the question we'll leave with you. If that algorithm had been running nationwide from day one, 4 years earlier, what would the map of cold chain money laundering across the United States actually look like? How many warehouses are humming right now, drawing power for 1,500 refrigerated containers, moving cargo for 90? Nobody knows. The federal agencies working this space don't say publicly. And the criminal organizations using industrial logistics as a laundering layer have no particular reason to change their approach, because the risk detection infrastructure is still catching up to the scale of what they've built. There's one piece of the Delgado side of this story we cut for length. Specifically, what happened to his brokerage after his cooperation became public record, and how his clients responded. Drop a comment if you want that covered in a follow-up. We track what comes next. Subscribe to the Bureau Files so the next case finds you first. The warehouse in Laredo has new tenants now. A legitimate logistics company, unrelated to any subject in the case, leased the facility 8 months after the raid and refurbished the cold rooms for produce distribution. The power meter reads at the right level, and somewhere in a federal evidence warehouse in San Antonio, sealed in an evidence bag stamped with a case number and a lot identifier, there is a single shrink-wrapped brick of vacuum-sealed currency. Condensation still visible on the plastic. 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Every day it sat in that freezer. The coldest money anyone in HSI Laredo had ever counted.